Have you ever stumbled across a photo so surreal, so nightmarish, that you thought it had to be fake? What if I told you that some of these unbelievable images are real? Today, we're going to explore three such photos, each capturing a moment of pure terror, tragedy, and the unexpected. But before we dive in, I have to warn you, these aren't just pictures, they're windows into some of the darkest moments in recent history. Ready to see what reality is truly capable of? Let's get started. It was June 10, 1990, a day that started like any other for Captain Tim Lancaster. As he stepped into the cockpit of British Airways Flight 5390, he was greeted by the usual pre-flight checks, the hum of the aircraft systems, and the comforting routine of years spent in the sky. The flight from Birmingham, England to Malaga, Spain was expected to be smooth. A quick journey for the 81 passengers on board who were likely dreaming of warm beaches and Spanish sun. But just 13 minutes into the flight, at an altitude of 17,300 feet, routine gave way to chaos. Without warning, a loud explosion echoed through the cabin, a sound so jarring it froze everyone in their seats. The left windshield of the cockpit had blown out, a catastrophic failure that immediately sucked Captain Lancaster out of the cockpit. In an instant, the peaceful flight turned into a fight for survival. For those inside the cabin, the sight was beyond comprehension. Captain Lancaster's body was wrenched halfway out of the aircraft, his upper body flailing in the freezing wind outside while his legs caught on the flight controls inside the cockpit. The pressure difference between the inside and outside of the plane had pinned him against the side of the aircraft. His body, slammed by 500-mile-per-hour winds, was contorted in an agonizing pose, as if he was a puppet on the brink of being torn apart. Co-pilot Alistair Atchison, despite the deafening noise and overwhelming panic, acted with remarkable composure. He immediately began an emergency descent, fighting to control the aircraft that was bucking wildly with its open cockpit. Meanwhile, the cabin crew rushed to the cockpit, and upon seeing their captain's plight, they didn't hesitate. Chief Steward Nigel Ogden was the first to reach Lancaster. He grabbed onto his legs with all his strength, screaming for help as the wind tore at his clothes and threatened to pull him out as well. The crew's efforts were heroic. For 22 agonizing minutes, they clung to Lancaster's legs, refusing to let go despite the overwhelming cold and exhaustion. The cockpit door, blown off its hinges, flapped wildly, narrowly missing the crew as they struggled to keep their captain from being sucked entirely out of the plane. Ogden later described how he could see the fear in Lancaster's eyes as his body was whipped against the side of the plane, his face smashed repeatedly into the fuselage, blood pooling from his nose and mouth. Miraculously, despite the odds, the crew managed to hold on, and Atchison successfully landed the plane at Southampton Airport. Emergency services rushed to the scene, expecting to find Captain Lancaster dead. But incredibly, he was still alive, severely injured, but alive. He had suffered fractures to his arms and wrists, frostbite, and severe bruising, but he had survived an ordeal that seemed impossible to endure. The photo that captured this moment is haunting. It shows Lancaster's body hanging out of the cockpit, his life hanging by a thread, with the determined faces of the crew reflecting the desperate struggle to save him. It's an image that looks like it was plucked from a disaster movie, but it's all too real. A testament to the sheer willpower of the human spirit when faced with the unimaginable. December 19, 2016 was supposed to be a day of diplomacy, a day when art and culture were meant to bridge a gap between nations. Andrei Karlov, the Russian ambassador to Turkey, was attending an art exhibition titled From Kaliningrad to Kamchatka Through the Eyes of Travelers at the Contemporary Arts Center in Ankara. The room was filled with officials, art lovers, and media, all gathered to celebrate the ties between Russia and Turkey. Karlov, known for his calm and composed demeanor, was an experienced diplomat. He had spent years navigating the often treacherous waters of international relations, always maintaining a steady hand. As he stood before the crowd, delivering his speech about the importance of cultural exchange, there was no indication that this day would be any different from the countless others he had experienced in his career. But in the crowd there was a man who had other plans. Mevlu Mer Altintas, a 22-year-old off-duty Turkish police officer, had slipped into the event under the guise of providing security. Dressed in a sharp black suit and tie, he blended in perfectly, his cold eyes betraying none of the storm brewing within. As Karlov spoke, Altintas moved closer, his hand tightening around the gun hidden beneath his jacket. Suddenly, without warning, Altintas pulled out his weapon and fired. The first shot struck Karlov in the back, and he crumpled to the floor. The room erupted in chaos, screams, people diving for cover, the sound of more gunshots. But Altintas was far from done. He stood over Karlov's lifeless body and fired several more shots, ensuring the ambassador was dead. In the confusion, most people ran for their lives, but a few brave photographers continued to capture the scene. One of these photos became infamous, a haunting image of Altintas standing over Karlov's body, his gun held aloft, his face twisted in a mix of triumph and anger. In that moment, he began shouting slogans, denouncing Russian involvement in the Syrian civil war, and proclaiming that his act was revenge for the suffering of civilians in Aleppo. This photo shocked the world. It was a stark reminder of how quickly violence can shatter the veneer of civility, even in the most controlled environments. For those who saw it, the image becomes synonymous with the fragility of peace and the ever-present danger lurking behind diplomatic smiles. Sydney Loof was a bright and spirited young woman from Lincoln, Nebraska. At just 24 years old, she was known for her infectious smile, her love for her family, and her passion for life. She worked at a hardware store, had a close-knit group of friends, and like many people her age, used dating apps to meet new people. For Sydney, the world was full of possibilities, and she was eager to explore them. On November 14, 2017, Sydney went on a date with a woman she had met on Tinder. Her friends remember her being excited about the date, hopeful that this might be the start of something special. The woman, Bailey Boswell, seemed nice enough in their chats, and Sydney felt a connection. The date went well enough that they agreed to meet again the next day. But after that second date on November 15th, Sydney disappeared. Her friends and family were immediately concerned when she didn't show up for work the next day. Sydney was reliable and responsible. It wasn't like her to just vanish. Her mother, Susie Loof, began a frantic search, contacting the police and spreading the word on social media, begging for any information about her daughter's whereabouts. Days passed with no sign of Sydney. The community rallied together, holding vigils and search parties, but hope began to fade. Then on November 30, their worst fears were confirmed. Sydney's dismembered body was found in garbage bags, scattered across rural Clay County. The discovery was gruesome and heartbreaking, leaving the community in shock and mourning. As the investigation unfolded, the horrifying details of Sydney's murder emerged. Boswell, along with her boyfriend Aubrey Trail, had lured Sydney into a trap. The couple had a history of manipulating and exploiting vulnerable women, but Sydney had no way of knowing that. What she thought was a promising new relationship turned into a nightmare. Trail later confessed that they had planned Sydney's murder as a part of a sick and twisted fantasy. In the days before her death, Sydney had taken a selfie, smiling brightly for the camera. It was her last photo, a moment of happiness and hope, completely unaware of the darkness that was about to consume her life. This image, now widely circulated, is haunting. A snapshot of a young woman on the brink of a tragic fate she couldn't possibly foresee. If you found these stories as haunting and thought provoking as I did, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There are many more lurking unknowns out there, waiting to be uncovered. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, the most unsettling stories are often the ones that are true. See you again.